Man, I got this crack on my finger because it's like cold out. You know what I'm talking about? Like when your hands crack. And I put on hand lotion so much, like tons. But I got this crack right on the knuckle. How in the world is it supposed to heal? I mean, it's been here for like a week already. It's like can't bend my finger. Oh my goodness gracious. Well, it doesn't affect my ability to record Babylon Talmud that much, so sorry. Alright, where are we? Hi everybody, welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Pei Aleph, Daf 81 of Masechta Pesachim. Well, Daf Pei 1 is kind of interesting. I think, basically, okay, so the first, let's say like half of it, discusses sugyas of like Nida and Ziva, well really Ziva, both a Zav and a Zavah, and about how they count their days and stuff. So it's, I don't know, it's kind of interesting if you're into that. And then, so we'll see really we're going to focus on the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, but in the big picture it's really a machlokas between Rabbi Yossi and the Chacham, and in our context in terms of how does Safek Tuma, i.e. Tumas hatehom of Ziva, fit into people who bring the Korban Pesach, or a Nazir, I guess, as well, but we're really talking about in the context of the Korban Pesach. And then on Amud Beis, we're really just going to discuss different details about Tumas hatehom, really. So, but the main juicy sugyas are really at the beginning of the daf. Let us get started on daf Pei Amud Beis, 2 lines from the bottom. Tumas hatehom de Ziva lo miratze, question mark. So, the last thing that we said yesterday was machlokas between Rave and Rav Yosef regarding Tumas hatehom when it comes to somebody who brings their Korban Pesach and also a Nazir. Rava wanted to argue that a Kohen would be able to do the avoda for a Korban Pesach and a Korban of a Nazir even if he is tamei with Tumas hatehom. Rav Yosef said that it's specifically talking about the people who are offering the Korban, the Ba'alim, the owners of the Korban Pesach or Korban Nazir. Now, here was the question. The question is that we have a Braisa taught by Reb Chia. And Reb Chia says in that Braisa that when we say that Tumas hatehom is okay by Nazir and by Pesach, it's specifically Tumas hatehom, i.e. Safek Tuma of a mace, of a corpse Tumas HaMace. Now, the Gemara wants to know, yeah, sure, corpse Tuma to the exclusion of what? So, Rav Yosef wanted to say, so initially we were assuming that it means the exclusion of Tumas Asheretz, which is how Rava got to his conclusion that it must be talking about the Kohen. Rav Yosef, however, said that we're talking about the owner of the Kohen, of the Korban, in which case the question is, fine, so the owner of the Korban Pesach or the Korban Nazir can be tamei Tumas hatehom of Tumas HaMace, i.e. Safek Tumas HaMace, to the exclusion of what? If we want to say that it's talking about to the exclusion of Tumas Sheretz, however, that's not so simple, at least when it comes, well, certainly not when it comes to a Nazir, because a Nazir is allowed to be tamei Tumas Sheretz. He's not allowed to be tamei Tumas HaMace. So therefore, if he could be vadai tamei Tumas Sheretz, then there's certainly no issue if he's Safek tamei Tumas Sheretz. So if we're excluding Tumas Sheretz, right, we're saying he's allowed to be tamei Safek Tumas HaMace, but not Safek Tumas Sheretz. Well, clearly we're not talking about the Nazir, because the Nazir, he is allowed to be certainly even vadai Tumas Sheretz. So then we say, okay, what about the person bringing a Korban Pesach? Well, that's a machlokas. It's not so pashut. There's a Manda Amar who says that you're allowed to bring, your shochten v'zarkin al tmei sheretz. That if you're tamei Tumas Sheretz, which is you're only tamei till the evening, it's a one-day tuma, so then you could do shrita and zrika, in which case, there wouldn't be anything wrong with Safek Tumas Sheretz. So that's a machlokas. So according to Rav Yosef, who wants to argue that what's allowed is Safek Tumas HaMace when it comes to Korban Pesach, and it's talking about the owners, well then what is not allowed? So Safek Tuma of Ziva. Now this is going to be the basis for the Gemara's discussion right now. What does Safek Tuma of Ziva mean? It means this. What is a Zav? Who could tell me what a Zav is? Fine, I'll tell you. A Zav is a fellow who sees this kind of Ziva. It's not sperm, it's something else. Not exactly sure what. Maybe like it's the kind of thing you'll know it when you see it. He sees this Ziva stuff, and so the way that Ziva works is that if a fellow sees this Ziva stuff, well then the first day, not that big of a deal, he's just treated like a Balkari, he's tummy till the evening. When he sees it, not even necessarily the second day, but twice in a row, if he sees it twice, this Ziva stuff he sees a second time, well then he becomes what's called a Zav Katan. A Zav Katan is essentially the same as a Zav Gadol. What's a Zav Gadol? Zav Gadol sees this stuff 3 times or more. So a Zav Katan and a Zav Gadol really are the same. We discussed this the other day. They are not allowed in Machne Shechina or Machne Levia. They have to hang out in the rest of Jerusalem, not quite like a Mitzorah who has to even leave the city. But they become a Zav. Anything they touch becomes Tamei. They're an Avatuma, all that kind of stuff. Mishkav Umoshav, fun times. The difference between a Zav Katan and a Zav Gadol is that a Zav Gadol, a fellow who sees this Ziva 3 times, he has to bring Korbanos on day 8, okay? Zav Katan doesn't. That's the only nafkamina, as far as I know. Now, so we're talking about a Zav Katan, a fellow who saw Ziva twice, and he becomes a Zav, which means that for 7 days he's in quarantine. We're talking about day 7 now. Day 7 is basically a Safek day, right? Because it's the last day. If all goes well and he doesn't see any more Ziva, so then that night he will be Torah and he'll be able to eat the Korban Pesach with everybody else. But if he sees Ziva, so then that will undo all of the 6 days previous where he didn't see any Ziva, and he'll have to start counting all over again. So this day 7 is kind of in limbo. That is the Tumas hatehom of Ziva that we're talking about. A Zav on day number 7, which is kind of in limbo, because if he sees Ziva, then he'll have to start all over again. If he doesn't, so then he'll be Torah in the evening. So if you shecht a Korban Pesach for a fellow who is Tamei Tumas hatehom of Ziva, will that work or not? So Rabbi Yosef wants to say that Tumas hatehom is only a Tumas HaMeis thing. It's only okay for Safek Tumas HaMeis. But for Safek Tumas Ziva, i.e. a fellow on day 7, it would not work. You cannot shecht Korban Pesach for a fellow who's Tamei Tumas hatehom, okay, of Ziva. Now, that was for a man. What about for a woman? How would this Safek Tumas Ziva thing play out for a woman? It plays out in the following way. What is a Zava? Who could tell me? Fine, I'll tell you. A Zava, so a woman who sees Dam Nida, so then she becomes a Nida for 7 days. Okay, so she sees Dam, she sees blood once, and then she's a Nida for the next 7 days. Whether she doesn't see Dam anymore during those 7 days, whether she sees Dam every day during those 7 days, it makes no difference from the time that she sees Dam, she's a Nida for 7 days. Now, there's this 11-day period that follows that. Now, this is what's called the 11 days ben Nida lenida, right? The 11-day period between being a Nida. So let's say like this. So she sees Dam the first time. She becomes a Nida for 7 days. Now, assuming that she does not see any more Dam for the next 11 days, and then she sees Dam after 11 days, well, that Dam that she sees after 11 days will start another Nida period, and she'll be a Nida for 7 more days, and all the Tumas Nida apply as a regular Nida. The question is what happens during the 11 days in between. So during these 11 days, so that is the time that's the window in which she could become a Zava. What this means is that if she sees Dam during these 11 days, so then, let's say like this. If she sees Dam 3 days in a row during those 11 days, she becomes a Zava, okay? So, and a Zava basically is the same halachos of a Zav, right? She's a Avatuma, all that kind of stuff. So that's if she sees Dam 3 days in a row. Okay, not like a Zav where if he sees this emission, not necessarily, either 3 days in a row, but I think even just 3 times, he would be a Zav, or twice even. But I think you could be a Zav caught in even if you see twice in 1 day, although I'm not 100% sure. But definitely if you see twice over 2 days, certainly. Now, but a Nida, a Zava, she would have to see Dam over the course of 3 days, 3 days in a row. Now, what happens for day 1 and day 2, where she hasn't yet seen it 3 days in a row, but she has seen, she's kind of in limbo. That's what's called Shomeres Yom Kineged Yom, that she's waiting, she's kind of in limbo. She's waiting another day to see what happens, okay? So, she sees Dam in between the 2 Nidas. So then, on that day, that day she's like, uh-oh, I gotta be on the lookout. Now the next day, in the morning, she can go to the mikveh in the morning, if she wants, and then she's just kind of on the lookout. If she doesn't see any more Dam, she doesn't see any Dam on day 2. So then she, take a deep breath, sigh of relief, that's it. But if she sees Dam on day 2, then she's in limbo again until day 3. And again, if she doesn't see Dam at all on day 3, so then it all goes away and we forget about it. But if she does see Dam on day 3, she becomes a Zava. Now, these first 2 days are what's called Shomer. She's going to be Shomeres Yom Kineged Yom. She's going to be kind of on the lookout to see if she's going to be a Zava or not. And this would be what's Tumas hatehom for a Zava. Okay, for a Zava, the Tumas hatehom would be these Shomeres Yom Kineged Yom days where we're not sure, if she doesn't see any Dam. So then by the nighttime, she's Tahor. She's Tahora. But if she does see Dam, well then she remains in limbo. So, yeah, with that kind of lengthy introduction, we haven't even started the daf yet, but I think we have enough info to kind of get started here. So, V'tumas to'om deziva lo meratze, question mark. So now, Rav Yosef wanted to say that when it comes to Korban Pesach, if there's Tumas hatehom of mace would be okay, Safek Tumas mace would be okay, but Safek Tuma of Ziva would not be okay. And you wouldn't be able to shech the Korban Pesach. Now, but we learn in the Brayser, Rabbi Yossi, Omer says Rabbi Yossi, Shomeres Yom Kineged Yom. So if you have a Shomeres Yom Kineged Yom, Sheshachtu v'zarku alea b'sheni shela, that they slaughtered the Korban Pesach and the Tzvikas Adam on day 2 of this, v'achar kach ra'asa, and then she saw Dam, Eino ocheles, so she's not allowed to eat the Korban Pesach because she's Tmeya. Uftur milasos Pesach Sheni, but at the same time she doesn't have to do Pesach Sheni. My time, how come? Lav mishum d'meratz tzitz, is it not because the tzitz is meratz on Tumas hatehom of Ziva? So meaning, what are we talking about? We're talking about a woman who's in these 11 days between Nida. Now, she saw a Dam on one day, let's say Sunday. She saw a Dam, and it's in between, it's the 11 days in between. So now she has to be Shomeres Yom Kineged Yom. So on Monday now, it's Erev Pesach, and she has to be on the lookout. She saw Dam yesterday. If she sees Dam today, it's going to join together with yesterday. If she doesn't see Dam today, then she'll be Tahor at night. Now, she woke up on Monday. She went to the mikveh, right? The day already started, so there was Miktsas Hayom. There was partial day already. And then she went to the mikveh. She was part of a group that they were doing Korban Pesach. They shechted the Korban Pesach, Zrikas Adam, everything. And then later on she sees Dam, which means, Memele, it's going to join together with the next day, the whole Safek Yom Kineged Yom thing. So now we're saying over here that Rabbi Yossi says that in this case, she wouldn't have to do Pesach Sheni, i.e., she fulfills her obligation of Korban Pesach. How come? I mean, after all, at the time that they shechted the Korban Pesach and everything, she was in this limbo state. She was a Shomeres Yom Kineged Yom, Safek Ziva. And yet, Rabbi Yossi is saying is that while she'll be unable to eat the Korban Pesach because she saw Dam again that day, right, and it's 2 out of 3 Re'iyos, and she still has to be in limbo, but she doesn't have to bring another Pesach Sheni, she doesn't have to bring a Pesach Sheni. She was Yotzei, she fulfilled her obligation. So it sounds like we're doing Shrita and Zrika for Tumas hatehom of Ziva, and that seems to be okay. Why is Rav Yosef saying that Tumas hatehom of Ziva would not be okay? Wow. That is the first question of the Gemara. So let's start again. V'tumas hatehom deziva lo meratze. Are we really saying that Tumas hatehom, when it comes to a Zav and a Zava, is not going to work. We learn in the Brayso, Rabbi Yossi Omer says, Rabbi Yossi shomer yom kineged yom. So if you have a shomer yom kineged yom, i.e. Tumas hatehom of Ziva, sheshachtu v'zarku aleh b'sheni shela, and it was day 2, i.e. it's Monday in our example, right? She saw dam on Sunday, now it's Monday, she shomer yom kineged yom, she's in limbo, Tumas hatehom of Ziva, v'achar kach ra'asa, and then after she sees dam. So Eina Ocheles, she's not going to be allowed to eat the Pesach that night because she saw dam again. But Uftur Milasos Pesach Sheni, but at the same time, she is not going to have to do Pesach Sheni because she was Yotze. My time, Allah Mishum de Miratze Tzitz, is it not because, well, the Tzitz was Miratze for the Tumas hatehom of Ziva that she had earlier that day. Amri Lo, they say no. That's not the reason why. Mishum de Ksav Rabbi Yossi Mikanu Lahaba Yimitama. Rather, it's because Rabbi Yossi understands this whole sugya in the following way, which is that on Monday morning, when she wakes up and she has Miktsas Hayom, like part of the day, Miktsas Yom Kikulo, right? The day already starts. So, and when she wakes up, she's Tahora at that time. So therefore, she's considered Tahora now. You know, right? What's Shomer Yom Kineged Yom? It means that if she saw Dam on Sunday, on Monday she has to not see Dam, and if she doesn't see Dam, she's Tahora. And says Rabbi Yossi, we could say Miktsas Yom Kikulo, that part of the day is like the entire day. And therefore, when she wakes up on Monday morning and she's Tahora, well then, Zeo, she's Tahora. She didn't see Dam that day. If she goes to the mikvah, Zeo, she's Tahora. What happens if she then later on sees Dam? Well, then from that point on, she's going to be Tameya. But at the time when she woke up and she went to the mikvah and they shechted the korban Pesach, she was Tahora. When she saw Dam later on, she's going to be Tameya. Now the Gemara is going to ask later on, well then, how are you ever going to have a situation of a Zava if every morning when she wakes up she's Tahora? The Gemara is going to ask that later on. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, and the same thing would apply to a Zav as well. If you have a Zav, and it's day 7, he wakes up on day 7, you have Miktsas Yom Kikulah, he goes to the mikvah, he's Tahor. If he then sees Ziva later on, so at the time that they shechted the korban Pesach, he was already Tahor. So the Gemara says, third line of the page, Amri Lo, they say no, Mishum Diksav Rabbi Yossi Mikanu Lahaba Yimitama, that Rabbi Yossi's opinion is that she's Mitama Mikanu Lahaba, meaning, so when, at the time that they did the Shritas Korban Pesach, she was still Tahora. When she sees Dam later on, she becomes Tamei from that point on. But there was no Tumas Safek at the point that they did Shritas, she was completely Tahora, she woke up in the morning, she was Tahora, she went to the mikvah, Zeh. V'al Tanya, we learn in a Brayso, Rabbi Yossi Omer, says the holy Rabbi Yossi, Zav Bal Shtei Re'iyos. If you have a fellow who has seen Ziva twice, okay, he's seen Ziva twice, he's a Zav, Zav Kain, he's a Zav. So now it's day 7, as we've explained, and he's sort of limbo day. If he sees Ziva, so then he has to continue being a Zav, although, remember, if we're saying Rabbi Yossi, by the time he wakes up in the morning, he goes to the mikveh, he's Tahor. But this is the sugya. This is what we're talking about. We're talking about a Zav on day 7. Okay? So, Ve'atani, Rabbi Yossi, Zav Bal Shtei Re'iyos. If you have a Zav who saw Ziva twice, he's a Zav Kain, a proper Zav. Sheshachtu v'zarku alav hashvi shelo. And they did Zrik, and they shechted the korban Pesach for him. Ve'achar kach ra. But then he saw Ziva afterwards. Darn it. V'chin shomer yom kineged yom. And similarly, Shomer Yom Kineged Yom, Sheshachtu v'zarku aleh b'sheni shela v'achar kach ra'asa, that they did Shrita and Zrika, and then she saw Adam afterwards. Same example as earlier. Harei elu mitam mishkav u'moshav v'mafreya. So interestingly, we're saying that retroactively, they're Tameh, Uftur Milasos Pesach Sheni, and they are part of doing Pesach Sheni, which, so, at face value, we want to say that this essentially uproots the entire mahalach of Rabbi Yossi that we were saying up until now, that they wake up in the morning, they go to the mikvah, they're Tahor, and then when they see Dam or Ziva later, at that point on, they become Tameh. No, it seems to be from here that Rabbi Yossi is saying that no, actually, it says Lemafreya, retroactively. Let's just take the Zav for a second. So it says it's day 7. He's in limbo. If he sees more Ziva, then that means that he didn't complete his 7 days of no Ziva. And it contradicts everything. And he's Mitame anything limafreya, kilu, anything that he may have touched from the time that he woke up in the morning and went to the mikveh and everything until now that he saw ziva again, we see that it all goes in the garbage. And he's tameh. And the same thing would apply to shomer yom kineged yom. That, we would treat it as though, I don't think that anything that she touches becomes tameh. I don't think that would only start once she's a zava, but we were saying that ki'ilu, she's tameh retroactively, which means at the time that we did the shritas korban Pesach, where they had not yet seen the ziva or the dam, at that point they were in limbo. They were suffix zav, suffix zava. Well, yeah, we're still kind of, by zava, it's still in the limbo in this 3-day period. So, how come we're saying that they don't have to do Pesach Sheni? Wouldn't it be because Tumas hatehom by ziva is permitted? So the Gemara says, no, no, this whole retroactive thing is only midrabanan. So we're maintaining the position that according to Rabbi Yossi, if a zav or a shomer yom kineged yom sees dam on this suffix day, dam or ziva on the suffix day, they're only going to be tamei from then on. Meaning Rabbi Yossi's opinion is when a zav on his 7th day or shomer yom kineged yom wakes up in the morning and is tahor or tahora, that's it. They're tahor. They go to the mikveh and that's it. When they see dam or ziva later on, then it's a new thing. Which means that at the time that we had shchitas korban Pesach, they were completely tahora. What's his bryce that says that retroactively they're tameh? That's midrabanan. Retroactively they're tameh. Midoraisa, they're completely tahor, or tahora respectively, and that is why you could shech the korban Pesach for them. But we don't necessarily have a proof to say that suffix tumas hatehom would be permitted. Well, that tumas hatehom would be permitted. Okay. Ve'af Reb Oshaya saver, and even Reb Oshaya holds mitami lemafreya midrabanan. So Reb Oshaya also holds that according to Reb Yossi, the tumah that we're talking about, lemafreya retroactive is only midrabanan. Now, I suspect that Reb Oshaya here is Reb Oshaya Bribi, that we learned about in Masechta Eruvin, that Reb Yochanan learned with Reb Oshaya Bribi for 10 days. I wonder if the following dialogue between Reb Oshaya Bribi, if it's Reb Oshaya Bribi, which I assume it is, and Reb Yochanan happened during those 10 days. And it's Vaf Reb Oshaya Savim Tamil Mafreya. Even Reb Oshaya holds that this tumah, that according to Reb Yossi, when a zav or a shomer yom kineged yom sees dam or ziva on that suffix day, it's only mikanu lahaba, but the mafreya it would only be tamil midrabanan. The Amr Reb Oshaya Bribi, the Amr Reb Oshaya Aval zav shira bashvi shelo, that if you have a zav who on day 7 sees ziva, so says Shilafanav. Says Reb Oshaya that he's going to contradict all the days beforehand, meaning he was a zav, he saw the ziva twice, now he has to have 7 days without seeing ziva. For 6 days he didn't see any ziva. Now comes day 7, he sees ziva, it undoes all the counting, he needs another 7 days. V'amal Reb Yochanan, lo yistar ela yomo. Reb Yochanan responds to Reb Oshaya, he says, no, ma pitom, it's only going to mess up that one day. So he still has this previous 6 days remain intact. But this one day he needs to make up. So the next day, if the next day doesn't see any ziva, then he's fine. Now, the Gemara asked me, how could Rabbi Yochanan's opinion be that he just needs to make up this one day? That's not like a thing. If Rabbi Yochanan holds that the zav, when he sees ziva on day 7, it's retroactive that he's tameh, i.e., it shows that he wasn't tameh in the first place because he didn't have 7 days without ziva. So then afilu kulu nistar. Well, if that's the case, then he should have to start counting all over again. If he holds that when the zav sees ziva on day 7, well then it's only mitame from the time that he sees ziva and forward, then yomunami lo nistar. Well then there shouldn't even be an issue with that day either, because it's a completely new zav counting. right? So if he says that when you see Ziva on day 7, it basically shows that, well, you were never tahor in the first place, well then everything goes in the garbage. And if he says that, well, if he says like Rabbi Yossi, that on day 7 when he wakes up in the morning and he doesn't see any Ziva, he's tahor, and then if he sees Ziva later on, then it's part of a new counting, a new Zav thing, well then, what's wrong with that day? Like, what's that day being soser? So, Ela Ema Lo Yistor V'lo Yomo. So rather, this is what Rabbi Yochanan means. It means Lo Yistor V'lo Yomo, meaning it's not soter anything. It's a completely new count. V'amle Rabbi Yossi V'omerle, and Rabbi Oshaya says to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi Kai Kavaseich, that Rabbi Yossi holds like you. Rabbi Oshaya is telling Rabbi Yochanan, that's the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, that because Rabbi Yochanan is saying that it's not soter anything, meaning that when he sees Ziva on day 7, it's just going to count for a new Ziva cycle. When he wakes up on day 7 and there's no Ziva, and he goes to the mikvah, he's tahor. When he sees Ziva later on, it's a new counting, it's a new Ziva thing. So Rabbi Shaya says to Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yossi is just like you. But Rabbi Yossi Omer Mitamin Mishkov Moshe Mafreh. But 1 second, I thought Rabbi Yossi said that a Zav who sees Ziva on day 7 is Mitamin Mishkov Moshe retroactively. So Elalav Shmamina Mitamin Mafreh Midoabonon Shmamina. So rather, what do we see? It must mean that Rabbi Yossi Mido Oraisa says that no, really you're not Mitamid Lemafreya, only Mikanu Le'aba. That is only Midoabonon, that we say that you're Mitame retroactively, meaning from the time that you went to the mikvah that morning until when you saw Ziva. Meaning, obviously, for the first 6 days, you're going to be Tameh because you were Mamash Azav for those 6 days. But on day 7, when you wake up in the morning and you don't see any Ziva, you go to the mikvah, you're now Tahor. When he says that when you see Ziva later on, retroactively during that window, we treat it as though you are Tameh. So that is really only Midrabanon, but Mida Oraisa, you were Tahor at that point, and the counting it's a new counting. Okay? Sounds like exciting times here at Babylon Talmud. Uli Rabbi Yossi, question, Rabbi Yossi, Hashta de Omer Mikanu Lahabu Mitame, Lemes Bovad Lemutemai. Well, okay, so Rabbi Yossi, if you're saying that a Zav, on day 7, when he sees Ziva, well, it's a new counting, well then, it sounds like you're never really going to have a situation of Tumas hatehom by a Zav. What's this Safek Zav thing? We wanted to say the Safek Zav, Safek Ziva, would be on day 7 when he's kind of in limbo. If he sees Ziva, then it contradicts everything before. If he doesn't, then he's Tahor that night. But according to Rabbi Yossi, no. There's no such thing. Once he wakes up in the morning, he's Tahor. Sees Ziva later on, it's a new counting. So it doesn't seem like there really would be a situation of Tumas hatehom by Ziva. So then, Rabbi Yossi, when we have a brisa that says that when we say Tumas hatehom by Pesach is permitted, that's talking about Tumas Meis, Safek Tumas Meis, to the exclusion of some other Safek that would be a problem. What's that other Safek? Clearly it's not Tumas Safek of Ziva, because that seems to be an impossibility. Since there is never this Tumas Safek. Once he wakes up in the morning and doesn't see Ziva, he's already Tahor. So what's the Tumas Safek that he's excluding? That if you had this Tumas Safek, you'd be unable to bring your Korban Pesach. So Nifshot Mina de Bekoin Vuchula Tumas hatehom. So are we gonna say that it's like Rava? That you know what the Tumas hatehom is talking about? It's talking about the Tumas hatehom of the Kohen. When you remember Rava wanted to say, well, you can't say it's talking about Tumas hatehom of Sheretz and say that that's a problem, because that's, by Nazir, it's Pashat not a problem, even if it's Vadai. And by Pesach, it's a Machlokas. So Rava wanted to say that it's talking about Tumas hatehom of the Kohen, that if he has Safek Tumas Hameis, he could still do the Avodah by Pesach and by Nazir. But if he has Safek Tumas Sheretz, he'd be unable to do the Avodah. That's what Rava said. So let's say that Rabbi Yossi would have to say like Rava, that it's talking about Tumas hatehom of the Kohen. So Amir Le'olam B'Bailim. So we say, no, really it is talking about the owners. Okay, so we're saying that Tumas Safek of Tumas Hameis would be okay by the owners. But which Safek would be a problem? Uvi Pesach, so I'm with the Korban Pesach, the Kasavar, And Rabbi Yossi holds, Ein shochtim v'zorkin al tmei sheretz, that you do not do shchita and zrika for tmei sheretz v'yitzter chlimute, and therefore we have to exclude it. So what we're saying is that, according to Rabbi Yossi, if a fellow is tamei tumas sheretz, so then you would not shecht the korban pesach for that fellow. What about if it was suffik tumas sheretz? Would you shecht korban pesach for that fellow? So Rabbi Yossi is saying is that what the Brisa is saying is that no, you would not. Tumas hatehom of a mace, you would shecht korban pesach, but tumas hatehom of a sheretz, you would not shecht korban pesach, and that is what is going on according to Rabbi Yossi. Well, that's how we could explain that according to Rabbi Yossi, the tumas hatehom that we're saying is allowed by korban pesach, and we're saying it's dafka tumas hatehom of a mace, is by the owners. And we're saying if they're suffik tumas mace, they could bring the korban pesach, but there's a suffik tumas sheretz, they cannot. Alright. Exciting times here at Babylon Talmud. El Rabbi Yossi, Zavah Gemura Heich Mishkachasla. Okay, so now going back to the question that I had mentioned earlier. So according to Rabbi Yossi, who says that, who could tell me what Rabbi Yossi says? That he says that if you have a shomer yom keneged yom, right? Let's go back to our example. She's in between, right? She's in these 11 days between nidas, and on Sunday she sees dam. So now on Monday she's in limbo. If she doesn't see dam, then she's tar. If she does see dam, it joins together with the previous day, and now there's 2 days, and she has to, day 3 is going to be the critical day to see if she's going to be a zav or not. Now, according to Rabbi Yossi, when she wakes up on Monday morning and she had not yet seen any dam, so memele she, miktsas yom kikulo, part of the day is considered like an entire day. She's at that point tahora, and therefore she goes to the mikveh, and that's that. If she sees dam later on, it's a new counting. Well, then how are you ever going to have 3 days in a row if every single morning she becomes tahor? So El Rabbi Yossi Zavah Gemura Heichi Mishkachas. How are you ever going to have a Zavah Gemura? So b'shofas, the Gemara answers, well, if she sees dam continually for 3 days, doesn't stop, so there was no time during those 3 days when she was tahor. Okay, and then she'll be a Zavah. Ibai same if you want to say Kagon Shirasa Kol Shnei Bein Hashmashos, or she saw in Bein Hashmashos 2 days in a row. So meaning, let's say Sunday night Bein Hashmashos. Now of course we know Safek Yom Safek Laila. Bein Hashmashos we don't know if it's day or night. So let's say she sees dam on Sunday night during Bein Hashmashos. So it's Ki'ilu she saw dam on Sunday and on Monday. So there's 2 days right there. And then if she sees dam again on Monday night Bein Hashmashos, so again Safek Monday, Safek Tuesday. So in this case, she saw dam twice, but both times it was during Bein Hashmashos on 2 consecutive days. So it's Ki'ilu, we have to treat it as if she saw dam on Sunday and on Monday and on Tuesday. That's how she'll be a Zavah according to Rabbi Yossi. By Rav Yosef asks a question. Kohen Amratza B'Tomid. Okay, so you have the Kohen who's doing the service by the Korban Tomid. Regular Korban Tomid is Korban Ilachmi, the Ishai, that Korban Tomid, every single day, twice a day. So, if he is doing the Korban Tomid, Huchilo Tumas hatehom or lo? If he's Tomei Tumas hatehom, the Safek Tuma, would he be allowed to do the Avodah? Im Timtzalomar Kohen Amratza B'Korban Osei, Huchilo Tumas hatehom. So if you want to say that, like Rava, that, so now Rav Yosef argued on Rava, but if you want to say like Rava, that when it comes to Nazir and Korban Pesach, the Tumas hatehom of the Kohen doing the Avodah is permitted. So Kohen Amratza B'Tomid Mai. So then what do we say by the Kohen who's doing the Avodah by the Korban Tomid every day? Do we say that Tumas hatehom by the Kohen is permitted by a Korban Pesach or a Nazir, but not by a Korban Tomid? Or Dilma, Yola Tomid be Pesach, or maybe we could learn out the Korban Tomid from Pesach and say just like Tumas hatehom is okay by the Korban Pesach, it's for the Kohen, it's also okay for the Korban Tamid. Rabba Kavachomer. Rabba says, isn't it obvious? It's logical. When it comes to Korban Pesach or Korban Nazir, if the Kohen knows with 100% certainty that he's Tameh, Tumas Hames, he's not allowed to do the Avoda for the Korban Pesach or for the Nazir. And yet we're saying that if he has a Safek Tumah, he's allowed to do the Avoda. Makom Shuhuchulo Tumah Yedua. So when it comes to Korban Tamid, where since it's B'tzibor, it's a Korban Tzibor, so if he knows for sure that he's Tameh, even in a case where he knows for sure that he's Tameh, he would theoretically be able to do the Avoda when it comes to Korban Tamid. Right, and as Rashi says, "Makom shutru lo tuma yudua heicha deleket taharin." If there are no taharin, so then he could, a tamei kohen who knows for sure that he's tamei would nonetheless be allowed to do the avoda, since the korban tamid is a korban tzibur. So eno din shehutru lo tumas hatehom. Well, then certainly safek tuma would be allowed for this kohen when it comes to the korban tamid. So Amrei, so the Gemara says, "Umidanina kavachom me'alacha." Rav, this doesn't make sense. How could you make a kavachomer from Halach l'Moshe Misinai, right? So we're assuming for now, really the maskana of the Gemara is going to be that Tumas hatehom, the fact that it's permissible by a Korban Pesach and by Nazir is a Halach l'Moshe Misinai. Okay? We have a tradition from our Sinai. And therefore, Rav is basically making a kavachomer from Tumas hatehom. If Tumas hatehom is permitted by Korban Pesach, well then certainly it should be permitted, right? If Tumas hatehom is permitted by Korban Tamid, well then certainly, no. If Tumas hatehom is permitted by Korban Pesach, then certainly it should be permitted by Korban Tamid. The only thing is that Tumas hatehom is a Halach l'Moshe Misinai, and you can't make a kavachomer from Halach l'Moshe Misinai, right? Midanin and kavachom me'alacha ve'atane, but we learn in a brayse Masechta Nazir. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer says to Rabbi Akiva, etzem kisar alacha, Rabbi Yizdam kavachomer, ve'indan kavachomer me'alacha. That there's when it comes to Nazir, so a Nazir, of course, if it becomes Tamei Tumas Hames, so then he's got to start all over again. So we say that this applies also to a bone the size of a barley kernel, right? Etzem kisar is mitame b'mago v'masa, it's not mitame ba'oil. Now, the question is, what about revius of dam, or revius of blood? If a Nazir touches a revius of blood, would he have to start all over again? So Rabbi Akiva wants to make a kavachomer and say, of course, if an etzem kisor, if a tiny little bone, he would have to start all over again, certainly a revius of dam, to which Rabbi Eliezer responds to Rabbi Akiva, says, you can't make a kavachomer regarding halach l'Moshe Misinai, because etzem kisor is halach l'Moshe Misinai. As we know, of course, we've learned twice already, as chitu sora gefen v'tein v'rimon, right? So sora there is etzem kisora to be mitame. So it's halach l'Moshe Misinai. So we see that you're not allowed to judge halach l'Moshe kavachomer from halach l'Moshe Misinai. So ela amarava yalef mo'adam mi Pesach. So rather, how do we know whether or not safek tuma, right? Tumas hatehom is permitted by Korban Tamid? Well, we learn out mo'ado. It says mo'ado by Pesach, v'yasu b'nei also Pesach b'mo'ado, and it says also by Korban Tamid la'akrav li b'mo'ado. So therefore, just like by Pesach, Tumas hatehom is okay, so also by Korban Tamid, Tumas hatehom is okay. Okay? Interesting. V'tumas hatehom gufa eicha ksiva. Okay, so now, we just said a second ago that Tumas hatehom is halach l'Moshe Misinai. The Gemara, as Rashi points out, it's somehow out of order at the point that we are learning that the following, as Rashi says interestingly, that right, interesting. That this question that was discussed in the Beis HaMedrash, they had discussed earlier than when we had this discussion about halach l'Moshe Misinai. So the Gemara wants to know right now, where do we see Tumas hatehom in the Torah? But Tumas hatehom gufa eicha ksiva. Where is Tumas hatehom by a Nazir and by a Pesach written in the Torah? Amar Belazar Amakra. Or Belazar says, the pasuk says, "V'chiyamos meis olav b'mchuveres olav." So, well, it says by a Nazir that if a mace dies on him, so then he'll have to start counting over again. So we see, when we talk about mace, it has to be b'mechuveres, it has to be clear, not safek. Okay, fine. If it's safek, then he's tahor. Ashkechon, right, he doesn't have to start all over again. Ashkechon nazir, osa pesach minolan. Okay, so that works by a nazir. What about by korban pesach? Rabbi Yochanan says, well, when it comes to korban pesach, who's somebody that does pesach sheni, that doesn't do korban pesach? It's somebody who's b'derech rechokah lachem, somebody who's tameh, right? If he was tameh, or he was far away, lachem, b'mechuveres lachem. It has to be clear to you. Okay, sounds good to me. And if it's a suffix, then it's not clear to you, and it's okay. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Amar Kederech. Well, he compares the Tuma to the Derech. Maderech begalui af Tuma nami begalui. Just like a road is revealed, it's clear. So also we're talking about a Tuma that is clear, not a Tuma suffix. Meisvei, we have a kasha on all three of these psukim, or really the rabbis who quoted these psukim. Ezu Tumas hatehom. What is the definition of Tumas hatehom, as we're going to see later on? Tumas hatehom needs to be Tuma that nobody knew about, and we're going to discuss this in a few minutes. If anybody knew about this Tuma, and we're talking about Tumas hatehom, we define as suffix Tumas hames. If anybody knew about this Tumas hames, so then it wouldn't be considered Tumas suffix, and you'd be Tameh. Now, Rabbi Eliezer the Amar b'mechuveres alav ad yadahu. Now, Rabbi Eliezer, it says, learns after the pasuk of right that kiyamus meis alav b'mechuveres alav. It has to be clear to him. Now, this brisa seems to be saying it doesn't have to be clear to him. If anybody in some far off place knew about it, it would already not be considered Tumas hatehom. Rabbi Yochanan the Amar lachem b'mechuveres lachem ad yad beitrei. So now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that he learns it out from lachem, meaning, so lachem is plural, so then two people would have to know about it. But this brisa seems to be saying if only one person knows about it, it would be Tumas hatehom. It would no longer be Tumas hatehom. The Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, the Amar Kederech ad yad kuli alma. According to Shimon ben Lakish, he says that the Tuma that would be considered Tuma in the context of korban pesach would be Kederech, like a way that everybody knows about. Whereas this brisa seems to be saying even if one person knows about it, it's no longer considered Tumas hatehom. So Ela Tumas hatehom ilchsa gemirela v'kas machlabama. Rather, concludes the Gemara, that Tumas hatehom is alach l'Moshe Sinai. And what about these psukim? Smachta, but really, be'etzem, the reason why Tumas hatehom is permitted by a korban pesach and by nazir is alach l'Moshe Sinai. And the definition of that, as we're going to see, is that nobody in the world knows about this Tumas hames. If anybody knew about it, so it would no longer be Tumas hatehom. Omar Mar bar Rav Ashi says, Mar bar Rav Ashi lo shanu ela shenodu lo la'achar zrika. Interesting. So first of all, so what's Tumas hatehom? So Tumas hatehom, so we've been defining as suffix Tuma. But we're going to see now, basically, that Tumas hatehom is the following. You have a fellow who's walking down a road. Maybe he lives in Beit Meir, and he's walking to Yerushalayim to bring his korban pesach, and he traveled on some road. And then he finds out later, on that road, there is a dead body buried there. And mamish, like, taking up the whole way of the road, certainly he's tameh. There's no question. He walked over it, he made an oil over the dead body, he's certainly tameh. But the thing is, nobody knew. They only found out later on. Nobody in the entire world knew that there was a dead body buried on that road. They only found out later on that there was a dead body buried there. That's what this Tumas hatehom is. And if there's even one person who knew that there was a body buried on that road, that it wouldn't be considered Tumas hatehom, the suffix Tuma. It's considered like it was known. It's not, complete suffix, and you would be tameh. Now, says Mar bar Rav Ashi. So Mar bar Rav Ashi lo shanu ela shenodu lo la'achar zrika. That we're only saying that Tumas hatehom is permitted if he finds out about this path that he was walking on after the Zrikas Adam happened. Maybe they somehow, went back and found it, whatever it is, somehow he found out. That at the time that the Zrikas Adam happened, he didn't yet know about it, so it was okay. But if he found out about this tuma before they did the zrikas hadam, and then it turns out, oh, that's not good, well then he can no longer do tumas. He can no longer do the zrikas hadam. It wouldn't work at that point. Mace, we have a kasha. If you have if somebody finds a mace that is lying on the width, across the width of a path, i.e., taking up the entire path, the truma tame. So in terms of truma, he's going to be tame. The nazir v'osa pesach tahor. But by nazir and osa pesach it's tahor, i.e., tumas hatehom. You took some path, and then afterwards you find that there was a mace buried there. So we say for truma, it's going to be a problem. You won't be able to eat truma. But for nazir and korban pesach, we say it's tumas hatehom, and it'll be permitted. V'chol tameh v'tar lahabahu. And whenever we say tameh or tar, it means in the future, meaning he's tahor right now. When it comes to pesach and nazir, he's tahor, which means that he could do zrikas hadam, no problem. So eli yitmar hachi yitmar. Rather, if you're going to state the statement of Mar Baravashi, it's in the following way. Don't say that only if he finds out after the zrika it would be okay. But if he found out before the zrika it would not be okay. Rather, even if he found out about the tumah before zrikas hadam, it's still going to be okay because it's tumas hatehom. Tumas hatehom by nazir and pesach is okay. Okay, Gufa. Let's read this Gemara, and then this Gemara is going to take us home. It was a complex daf so far today, but I don't know. I guess my brain works okay with these Zav kind of stuff. I don't know if that's a good thing. Let's go weiter. Gufa. We said earlier, Hamotze Meis Mushkav L'Roch Bo Shel Derech. Okay, so we said if you find a corpse taking up the entire path, so the truma tame, so for truma it's going to be a problem. The nazir v'osa pesach tar, but by nazir and korban pesach it'll be okay because it's tumas hatehom, and tumas hatehom is okay by nazir and pesach. But medvar memurim, when do we say that by truma it's going to be a problem? She'ein lo makom la'avor, that if there's mamish no other way to pass, and you 100% made an oil over this mace, and you're certainly tame. Aval yesh makom la'avor af l'truma tar. But if there was a way to pass, so then even for truma you'll be tar, because then it's mamish just tumas safek, meaning tumas hatehom. So I guess there's a difference between tumas hatehom and tumas safek. Tumas hatehom is basically you didn't know at the time, and nobody knew at the time, not even anybody anywhere. You only found out because you did some excavating afterwards and found that there was a dead body over there. That's tumas hatehom. Tumas safek is, for example, if the mace wasn't taking up the entire path, rather just some of it, and now you don't know, did I go over the mace or not? Well, we know, we've seen a few times, that tumas safek b'shus harabim is tahor. So, if the mace wasn't taking up the entire path, and now it's just a matter of, I'm not sure, maybe I walked over the mace or not, well then even by truma, you can eat truma, because the Kohen can eat truma, because safek tumah b'shus harabim is tahor. But if it was mamish taking up the whole path, which means that at the time that you passed over, you didn't know that it was there, so that's tumas hatehom. So then, for truma it would be tameh, but by pesach and nazir it would be tar. But medvar memurim, and when do we say that for truma it's tameh? Shemitzah shalim. If you found the dead body all in one piece, aval meshubar meforak. But if it turned out that the dead body was kind of broken up and scattered, tahor, well then you could eat truma. Shema ben aprakim avar, because maybe you walked between the bones, in which case it's safek tumah b'shus harabim. Uvikever, and in what if you found the bones in a coffin? Afilu mishubar meforak tameh mipnei shakever mitzayfo, right? Or I guess if it's a coffin. What else would be a kever? I don't know. Buried in some kind of something. But then that let's say coffin would join all the parts of the mace together into one unit, and therefore if you walked anywhere over that unit, you would be tameh. for truma. And when do we say that if the bones were broken up and it wasn't in a kever, so then you would be tar for truma, because we could say that you walk between the bones? That would be if you're just walking, aval, ta'un or rachuv. But if you were carrying some kind of burden, that the burden, that it's hard to walk straight because you're carrying stuff, or if you're riding, and also, I guess, either it's harder to go in a straight line, or because you're going from side to side, or maybe you're carrying stuff, so then you'll be tameh. Then that won't work. Because if you're walking with if it's just you walking, so then maybe you walk between the bones and you didn't make an ohel over the bones and you didn't touch any of the bones, aval, ta'un or rachav. But if you're carrying a burden or riding, certainly you're going to touch some of the bones or make an ohel over it, so you'd be tameh with regard to truma. And when do we say that when it comes to Nazir and by Korban Pesach, you'd be tahor, you'd be allowed to bring the Korban Pesach or the Korban Nazir? But Tumas hatehom, that's only Tumas hatehom, a tumah that nobody knew that the body was there. But if it was known that there was a body on this path, well, tameh, then it wouldn't be Tumas hatehom, and you'd be unable to offer your Korban Pesach or your Korban Nazir. Ve'ezei Tumas hatehom, and what is Tumas hatehom? It's that nobody in the entire world knew that body was buried there. But if even one person knew that there's a dead body buried there, then that is not Tumas hatehom. If you found the body buried under straw, under earth, under stones, pebbles, how is it Tumas hatehom? That would be Tumas hatehom. But if you found the body submerged in water, or in some dark area, or in crevices and stones, ain't it Tumas hatehom? That's not Tumas hatehom, because you could have theoretically seen it if you looked a little better. And as we said, Tumas hatehom is only by a mace, not by any other things, which is how we got into this whole discussion in the first place. What's it coming to exclude? Ziva, sheretz. Well, that was daf Pei Aleph of Masechta Pesachim. Shtickle Zav, Zava, Tumas hatehom, Safek, Tumas stuff. So we started really as a continuation from yesterday, really from that last line that we just read, which is that Tumas hatehom by Nazir and by a Korban Pesach that is permitted is Davka Tumas hatehom of a Tmei Meis. Now to the exclusion of what? So we wanted to suggest maybe to the exclusion of Tumah of a Zav, which is how we got into the sugya of how do we treat the Tumah of a Zav or a Zav on their last day. So we saw the opinion of Rabbi Yossi, who says that a Zav or a Zava on a day that's besafik, whether it's a Zav who's Shemeres Yom Kineged Yom or a Zav who is on his last day. So according to Rabbi Yossi, once he wakes up in the morning and he hasn't seen Ziva or she hasn't seen Dam, Memela they go to the mikveh and they're tahor. And then if they see Ziva or Dam later on, it starts anew, which means that if it was Erev Pesach and you shechted the Korban Pesach in this window after you went to the mikveh, you would be completely tahor, and that's why it works. But in terms of Tumas hatehom of a Zav, we're going to assume that would not be okay. Now the Chacham argue on Rabbi Yossi. Now this wasn't in the Gemara, it's really just in a Rashi, but just in terms of the bigger picture, the Chacham argue on Rabbi Yossi. And they would say that no, if she sees Dam later on in the day, on the Shemeres Yom Kineged Yom, or if he sees Ziva on day 7, so it would show that really retroactively he was Tameh the whole time, in which case it would be it would be Tumas hatehom, and we're saying that it's Tumas hatehom would be Tameh by Ziva, according to the Chachamim. But according to Rabbi Yossi, they would be tahor at that point, and the Tumah would only start anew from the time that she saw Dam or he saw Ziva, but at that point he was tahor. So then the question is, how do you have Tumas hatehom of Ziva? By Rabbi Yossi, because Memela they're tahor when they wake up in the morning, and she hasn't seen Dam, he hasn't seen Ziva. So he says, well, there is no Tumas hatehom by Ziva. Well then, what's Tumas HaMeis coming to exclude? by Korban Pesach and by Nazir, it's coming to exclude Tumas Sheretz. That according to Rabbi Yossi, he would be of the opinion that you're unable to shech the Korban Pesach by Tumas Sheretz. And so even though by Nazir, Tumas Sheretz would be okay, but by Korban Pesach, he says you would be unable to shech Korban Pesach for somebody who's tamei Tumas Sheretz, and therefore we're saying Tumas Tahom of a mace is okay to the exclusion of Tumas Tahom of a Sheretz. Okay, and then we spent the rest of the daf really talking about Tumas hatehom kind of things. So like, what's the source of Tumas hatehom? We said it's Halachah Moshe Misinai, and then we really explained what a Tumas hatehom is basically if there's a mace buried on a path and it's taking up the entire path and you traveled on that path, so you certainly walked over that mace, but nobody in the entire world knew that there was a mace there, so that's what's called Tumas hatehom. And by Nazir and by Korban Pesach, you'd be allowed to offer your Korban Pesach or Nazir even if you were tamei Tumas hatehom. Hope everybody enjoyed that technical daf. Peace out.